share the screen. The PowerPoint is on in your D2L, so we'll look at that. There's going to be a lot of videos. Hopefully the videos will show up on the recording. If not, I'll re-record it using Camtasia, so it's all for you guys to understand. All right, so have you guys heard this term before, universal design for learning? Okay. Some that have me, we talk about this a lot, but anybody else? I know, you know, we've talked about it in the behavior class. Universal design. Have you heard this term, or is it kind of all new? Okay. Here's the thing. Universal design actually came out of architecture. So that was an interesting thing, that it came out of architecture, because it came out of the whole piece of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. It first started with looking at things that are equal access to buildings. And so things like, you start seeing cutaways in the on the sidewalks, so people, little ramps on the sidewalks, ramps to buildings, those kind of things, elevators to the top floors. Those are things that are universal design. That way everybody has access. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or not. You have access. So that's it came out of that. And so now then we start to talk about universal design for learning in schools. And we're going to go to the CAST website real quick. Here is going to go to CAST. Hopefully it'll show up. The original CAST website is right here, and it talks about all the different stuff for universal design for learning. And there is a book that you can read online. Let me try to find where that is. I will give you the link to the book so you can join, and then you can read the book online. It's an interactive book. It's got a lot of videos and stuff. We'll watch a lot of the videos today, and we'll go from there. So this is Universal Design for Learning. And it has, when we get into it and we start looking at all these elements of UDL, it talks about 3 different systems, the brain systems, that causes students to be engaged, represent information, and take action and express. And so these are the 3 areas that Universal Design for Learning focuses on. So when you develop an intervention for the Universal Tier 1 stage, it needs to be a universal design kind of process. So we're going to walk through each of these elements today. So CAST, it was founded in 1984 when this all started. They started talking about universal design. CAST is a not-for-profit group that came out, and they provide trainings, teacher preparation, strategic partnerships, and international outreach. Their mission is to transform education design and practice into learning that has no limits. So in other words, they don't care if you have a disability or not. This is, CAS wants you to have the equal access to education and be able to learn at the most optimum piece. All right, so here's where I want to tell you guys, for sure you need to be thinking about research-based interventions, correct? Always. Remember the Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA, which is the General Education Law. It was originally the Elementary Secondary Education Act back in 1970 or 60s or something like that. That law says that all instruction must be based on evidence-based practices or scientifically based practices. So let me toss something out to you guys. Have you heard in any of your other classes or in any of your readings learning styles? Yes? Who's heard about learning styles? Okay. Do you know what the research is to support learning styles? Have you guys looked at it? Or are you just taking it as face value that everybody has a learning style? Well, we can talk. This we have masks. We can't talk.
I hadn't looked at anything.
I'm sorry?
I just kind of accepted it. I didn't ask.
Say one more.
I didn't ask what the research behind it was. I just kind of accepted it.
You just accepted it. Well, I'll tell you right now, there is absolutely no research to support learning styles. They did a double-blind study on it, trying to identify if people have a specific learning style. They could not prove anything. There's no research to support it. So it is bunk. It is pseudoscience. It is mythology. There is no such thing as a learning style. You might have a preference for learning, but there is no learning style. Multiple intelligence is a bunk. It has no research to support it. That is, you look at the research and you will be amazed. However, it is perpetuated across the world as being a valid thing, valid theory. It's not a valid theory. It has no research to support it. So all this time you spend on learning styles, I don't want to hear any of you or read any of you when you make a reflection talk about learning styles or multiple intelligences, period. It's bunk. It doesn't exist. It is a myth. Kind of like the chupacabra or Bigfoot. Whatever. They're mythology. They're not real. So, but what we're going to talk about today is real. It has tons of research to support, and it is excellent strategies for you to use in your classroom. And so I want you to talk about research-based stuff. Sousa talks about research-based stuff. CAS talks about research-based stuff. Your textbook talks about research-based stuff. And you won't see learning styles in any of it. But we'll look at some things that are supported by research. All right. UDL at a glance. The UDL framework guides the design of instruction so that you can appropriately set goals, assess students, and provide the proper materials for students that can be customized to meet the unique needs of kids. Again, UDL is for all students, not students with disabilities only. So we're going to watch a couple videos, 3 actually, to understand what UDL is.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal. This means that teachers of today that minimizes barriers. Classrooms are highly diverse and learning for all students designed from the start to meet this diversity. Whoa, that's a fancy term.
Okay.
Universal design for learning is an approach to let's unpack it a bit that minimizes barriers. Let's think about the word learning for all students. By universal, we mean whoa, that's a fancy term. Understood. Universal design for learning. Each learner in the classroom has their own background. Let's think about the word universal. And by universal, we mean curriculum that can be used in. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student.
When the thing was muted, you couldn't tell. And so now then, let's watch the video without all the noise.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in the classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum, and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org. This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher.
Don't have very good, it's not minding very well today. All right, so let's watch the next little video on UDL.
In many classrooms, the focus is on an illusory average student. Many curricula are designed for that student. Cognitive neuroscience has shown us that there really isn't an average student anywhere, and that's why it's an illusory student. Universal design for learning, though, is particularly focused on making sure that we get those students who have been marginalized, for whom that designing for the average student has never worked well. And that certainly means students who have been struggling, students for whom English is not their first language, students with disabilities. They've been typically marginalized by this illusory average curriculum. Secondly, though, students at the other margins, students who are called gifted and talented, are also students who've been underserved by this mainstream curriculum. They haven't been challenged. They're bored. They're underserved as well. UDL is a framework based in cognitive neurosciences for designing learning experiences that work across a wide spectrum of learners. Its main purpose is to make sure that everybody is a successful learner and reaches what we call being an expert learner. That is, they know a lot, they know how to do a lot, and they love learning and want to do it more. The key to universal design for learning is that we're designing learning experiences which from the beginning are designed to be universal and to make sure everybody learns. And that design is primarily based on the power to be very flexible in allowing choices, in allowing different paths, in allowing for things to be presented in different ways, so that we reach those other two things, universal and everybody learns. The three principles of universal design for learning come from careful analysis of what learning really is, and particularly the research that has been done by thousands of other researchers in cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience, neuropsychology, which have carefully looked at what comprises learning, how does learning really work, and what are its differences among individual learners. From that work, we've abstracted out three simple principles that are involved in any learning situation. How does the learner pick up information? How do they express and act on that information? And how are they engaged by the learning situation? There are three broad principles. The first has to do with how we present information to the learner. And we talk about multiple means of representation. As it turns out, there's no one way that we can present information so to be successful for everyone to learn it. So we talk about multiple means of representation. So in UDL, we talk about providing multiple representations so that we're sure everyone will be able to make sense of the symbols, the language, the drawings, and so on. Take, for example, in teaching mathematics, it's typically very strong to use multiple representations, not just the symbolic expression of the numbers, but manipulables, things children can operate on and see directly, perceptually, rather than their symbolic form. So that's a great example of providing multiple representation, both the symbolic number and a physical manipulative. The second principle is provide multiple means of action and expression. And that takes into account the fact that students vary greatly in how they express what they know, how they can act skillfully, how they can communicate in language or in drawing and so on. And students differ widely, so we say we must provide multiple means of expression over the course of our teaching and learning. The third principle is multiple means of engagement. And in many ways, it's the most important principle. If we don't engage students in learning, don't make it important to them, make them motivated for it, then none of the other forms of representation and expression will be that important. Within Universal Design for Learning, when we look at a curriculum, we think of 4 main components, and each of them need to be universally designed. The first component is, what are its goals? How do we translate standards into things that are important to do in the classroom? Secondly, what are the materials that are going to be in that classroom? Everything from a chalkboard to a textbook to a workbook to something on the wall. Are these materials key to learning? And if so, are they universally designed for learning? Third, the methods. How does the teacher go about teaching when she or he is working at helping students learn? Does she set up collaborative groups? Does she lecture? Does she provide experiences out in the world? And lastly, and very important to Universal Design for Learning, is the means of assessment. How are we sure that learning really occurs? When we began our work, we, like most people, were focused on learners who were doing poorly, who looked like they had disabilities. Over time, we began to change our focus because we could see when we were in classrooms that the classrooms were in fact disabling, that they were not designed properly to ensure that every child would succeed. And we began more and more to see that the curriculum itself was disabled, and that the work of the Universal Design for Learning guidelines is to reduce the disabilities in the curriculum itself so that more students succeed, more students have optimum challenges, and come out as expert learners in the end.
All right, and then our last one, the introduction.
Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a design framework that focuses on supporting student success for all students with diverse learning and life needs, not just those with exceptional abilities or who need special help. This concept, which has been developed and advanced by the National Center on Universal Design for Learning and the Center for Applied and Special Technology, asks instructors to consider how they can reduce barriers or impediments in their classrooms and increase access so that all students have greater opportunities to succeed. You might be wondering, what does this mean? And where does this idea come from? Let's start with the second question, because it might help to clarify the first one. Universal Design for Learning comes out of architectural and physical design principle of universal design. In this way of designing space, architects and planners make an environment accessible for those on the margin, and this actually helps reduce the barriers to access for entry for everyone. For instance, think about a ramp in front of a building. While this design element may have been specifically included for people in wheelchairs, it's also really helpful for people who have a hard time with stairs, parents pushing strollers, or travelers with luggage. Or how about automatic doors? These may be designed for people with mobility or motor issues, but they also help those who have their arms full or who don't want to touch doorknob during cold and flu season. In our physical environment, then, we work to reduce barriers people may encounter to access a space.
And this idea can be translated to learning in our classrooms. Whether we recognize them or not, our students encounter barriers to learning. By proactively considering what those barriers might be before the learning interaction takes place or class starts, we can increase the opportunity students have to see academic success. For instance, do you find you have a lot of non-traditional students in your classes? These learners might encounter very specific barriers to success. For instance, they might be commuters. They may also have to balance work and life responsibilities along with their academic course load. These non-traditional students may be veterans who may face unique challenges rejoining civilian life. Or do you have students who come to your class with different interpersonal expectations? In a single course, I'm sure you've had students who can't stop talking and students you can't get to talk. These students may experience different barriers to achieving academic excellence in your course. But by thinking of what these barriers might be ahead of time, you can design your learning environment to maximize their respective potential. It's important to note, though, that reducing these barriers does not mean watering down course outcomes or overhauling curricular content. Instead, UDL offers a way of thinking about how students can work toward those course outcomes, or how they can learn key curricular content while still maintaining standards of academic excellence. UDL strategies may reduce the need for some accommodations for students with certain disabilities, but will not eliminate the need for all accommodations. Rather than focusing on a disability model, UDL centers on a model for social justice to support all diverse learning needs. What UDL does do, though, is provide some structure for rethinking how you can effectively design learning in your classroom. There are 3 principles you can incorporate into your teaching as appropriate. First, you can provide multiple means of engagement, or ways in which instructors can make content interesting, relevant, and motivating for students to learn. Also provide multiple means of representation of information to your students as they work to develop disciplinary knowledge, or ways we provide materials and resources using a range of presentation formats and techniques. And provide multiple means of action and expression as students seek to demonstrate that knowledge, or a variety of ways in which we can assess how students demonstrate their skills and knowledge. We explore these principles more in depth in our next video, but if you find yourself working with students with diverse learning and life needs, think about whether UDL and its principles might work in your classroom.
Okay, so let's do just a little bit of peer and share talking. Talk at your tables with your table mate. If you guys want to try to talk here, join a group, stay social distance. What is 2 things that you learned from the 3 videos that you watched about UDL? So let's talk about, I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to talk about that. And those of you guys online, go into your chat and put in 2 things that you guys learned. Did I say 2 things? Okay. 2 things that you learned from the videos about UDL. So we'll do that in the chat, and you guys talk here, and we'll come up with 2 things for each table group. Okay, 5 minutes.
Really the only thing that
Do you guys find it more difficult to have conversations when you do have a mask on? It's tough, isn't it? If it's 5 minutes too much, are we good? We identified 2 things? All right, so I'm going to put the online things in brown, or you can read them up on the screen. So from Claire, we've got it does not replace accommodation. It breaks down learning barriers, which is a great thing. Remember when we talked about section 504 and we talked about handicapping? Handicapping are barriers. And so when we think about this, we in education have set up certain barriers for different learning. Kids that learn differently, which according to the very first video, there is no typical student, right? Everybody is unique. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember is that we're all unique and we learn differently. Adult learning is different than children learning. Adults need to hear concepts about 7 times before they make it real. Kids are different, and so, but it's how interested you are in a concept is how quickly you learn it also. So that's that whole engagement and affective area of the brain is really important. So that was a great comment from Claire. Zachary says it increases learning opportunities for all learners. It also develops a new way of thinking about equity and diversity. This is a social justice action, correct? It's more than so it's really kind of cool. Chanel said UDL aims to cater to the learning needs of all students. Good job, Chanel said learning needs of all students in the classroom. And Peyton, UDL creates flexible learning environments with appropriate accommodations, special to each student so students are successful. Outstanding. Let's talk, you guys share now, your tables. Just speak up. We'll do popcorn. You don't have to raise your hand, just speak up.
We said reduce barriers to increase success.
Say it one more time.
Reduce barriers to increase success.
So reducing the barriers to increase success. So that's good. Anybody else?
We said like if you include the, or like if you model it from the disabilities, then everyone.
Right, so if you model it from, you take it from the most need, then everybody's benefits. It's like the ramps, right? I have this cartoon, I'll share it with you, I'll email it to you later. It's this cartoon of this guy cleaning the snow off of the steps, and all the kids are waiting to get into there, and a young man in a wheelchair says, you know, if you clean the ramp, everybody can get in. He says, but I got to clean the steps off first. The guy's not thinking. So the ramp is really, that's really the thing. So that's good. Good job. What else? Is UDL reactive or is it proactive? Proactive. So it's before, you've got to be thinking beforehand, which is really important. If the amount of work you put in in advance, you reap that benefit later on. So if you fix the problem before it has a chance to happen, then you can take care of that problem all along. So let's see, anybody else want to share? I think that we've all got a similar idea. Melanie Castillo said the UDL's focuses on making sure all students learn and succeed. And that's so true. Good job, guys. I really enjoyed your comments. Anybody else want to say something before we move on? All right. So let's see if we can continue our... Okay, I want you guys to look at this little graphic. This first, if you look at the 3 panes, this first image right here, this is equity. We're providing the exact same thing and not based on unique needs of kids. So is that an effective strategy? 1.
Because it only benefits 2 of the kids, not all.
Right, it doesn't benefit everybody, it just benefits only a portion. So then this one is what we call accommodate. We're accommodating. And it meets the needs of everybody, but it's more reactive than it is proactive. Do you see that? You have to know what they need after they get there rather than being proactive. Now this is universal design, right? And then it takes away all barriers of that, of both 1 and 2, and allows for everybody to learn. So that is UDL. It removes all systemic barriers so people have access. And it is proactive. And you know, the thing that's unique is it benefits all 3 people, right? It's cool. So that's where we need to be thinking about in education. And disability studies and all this other is all about being proactive and making sure that we're meeting the unique needs of everybody in the classroom, not just kids with disabilities. And that is very, very, very important. So that's a visual example for you guys. So we've done auditory, we've done visual, we've done engaged. So we're doing meeting all those ways that we engage things. Okay, so now we're going to look at the 3 different networks, and we're going to look at first the network of why of learning. Why do we do learning? The purposeful, motivated learners, and how it's engagement. So we're going to look at engagement, and engagement's an interesting thing. It's provide options for self-regulation. Here's a very interesting thing. If a student is engaged in the learning, do they have time to act out in the classroom? Think about that. An engaged student is not a behavior problem. So don't you think you need to figure out how to engage all students to make sure that your classroom behaviors are appropriate? This is the first and foremost element of classroom management, is make sure your students are engaged. That's huge. So it provides options for self-regulation. And here's a really cool thing. Think about this. Self-regulation rather than being teacher-regulated, right? Kids that have behavior problems, they tend to be external locus of control. And what external locus of control means is that things outside of their brain, outside of their body, are managing their behavior, managing their learning, all those things. What we need to do is teach them to be internal locus of control, where they manage their own behavior, and manage their own learning. They are in charge. If they are in charge, then your job is halfway done. Now you just have to provide them the information so they can learn it. And see, is that much better than arguing with a child? When you argue with kids, are you going to win the argument? Never. Because they're going to figure out how to get you back. Kids are funny. They can be stubborn. Oh my gosh. So it's interesting. So it teaches self-regulation, teaches persistence, resilience, huge piece. It provides options for recruiting interest, getting them interested. So let's watch this video about this particular network.
Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a design framework that instructors can use to reduce barriers students face in the classroom and increase access to opportunities to succeed. We can implement UDL in our classrooms through 3 guidelines: engagement, representation, and action and expression. In this video, we will develop ways to provide students with multiple means of engagement, which answers the question of why students should learn this content or when they will use this information. While this principle can be implemented in no-tech, low-tech, and high-tech ways, UDL adopters often use free and low-cost technology tools due to their powerful learning possibilities. This particular UDL approach focuses on giving learners diverse ways to be involved with a course's content, fellow students, and the instructor. By building in different engagement opportunities, you can help students see the relevance of disciplinary knowledge in their academic, professional, and personal lives. First, let's talk about some concrete strategies that can help students across classrooms without watering down learning outcomes. Now, of course, not every one of these strategies will work in every course or subject area. It's important you find the ones that you're comfortable with and that align with your goals for learners. Can you consider ways to build learning activities that have real-world purposes and audiences? These kinds of tasks might involve an in-depth, immersive experience, like service learning, but they can also be smaller experiences or more hypothetical. For example, ask students to identify potential audiences for their work or real-world applications for what they're doing. Or ask past students to share how their course experiences both met learning outcomes and was authentic in their professional and personal lives. Also, build in opportunities for students to have input in how classroom tasks and activities are designed. Of course, you need to do this within reason, but there are a number of ways that learners can have a voice in classroom structure. Ask them to decide whether certain discussions take place online or in a face-to-face class session, or take the class temperature by collecting regular and informal feedback on how students see activities relating to the attainment of learning outcomes.
This kind of feedback can help your work as an instructor, but it can also force students to consider how they can better align their work and effort to achieve learning outcomes. Throughout your course, you can also consider building linked tasks that have varying degrees of difficulty, but work toward a common course outcome. These varied assignments or activities will require different levels of engagement and attention, but they can help learners grapple with challenging ideas throughout a course experience rather than just on a midterm or final exam. Also vary the order of activities in your classroom in terms of the effort students have to put in. Go from easy to difficult or difficult to easy to gain students' attention. And finally, think about how your prompt and frequent feedback to students might foster their engagement in the course. Use rubrics to clarify your expectations and expedite the grading process, while also giving concrete and timely information on how learners can improve their performance going forward. Or stagger assignment dates so that you don't get overloaded with providing feedback. Don't discount the formative feedback peers can provide, especially if you use a grading rubric or guideline. These are some ways to consider multiple means of engagement that may help all learners in your classroom. Some of these may sound familiar, as many of them are simply good pedagogical strategies. If you're looking to target specific learner groups in your discipline, it's helpful to first identify who they are and what they need in terms of engagement. For example, using a variety of familiar contexts to ground new ideas or asking learners themselves to ground these ideas in context can help English language learners, international students, and non-traditional students make sense of disciplinary ideas. Or using visuals to clarify vocabulary terms can help to engage students with auditory impairments, English language learners, or struggling readers. For more information on concrete strategies to integrate multiple means of engagement into your teaching, visit oakland.edu/CETL or check out the strategies shared by CAST or the National Center on UDL.
Okay, so again, let's,
Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a design framework that instructors can use to reduce barriers students face in the classroom and
okay, so talk to your table mates again about what you learned from about engagement, and we'll share that out. You guys online, yeah, I'll put it on in the chat. Again, just two things that you learned, and we will share out this time. We'll yeah. Okay, so let's, just share one per table. You guys, what do you guys talk about?
We talked about, increasing student input from class, the activity design part of that. She liked the idea of having students involved in like how activities are done so that they have more interest. And I liked the varying activity difficulty, specifically the harder at the beginning and the harder at the beginning.
So it makes it, keep them engaged all the way through. Good job. Okay, you guys, what do you guys?
I just like this, and like the motivation to keep the kids motivated and what they're learning.
Right, so
Those sales
motivation's huge.
Yeah.
And so, and if you engage them, then they own that learning, right? Good, you guys.
We talked about like connecting and looking onto the real world, like to keep the students engaged and just student input, like having discussions about like when they should be doing student policy.
Yeah, good job, good.
We talked actually about like the, like the healthy learning environment is important and that like you need different resources for each individual is different. Talked about for like engagement.
And so, yeah, the environment and making it much more accessible. Good. And finally, you guys?
Also like learning control like videos or something that they can always go back to and watch it.
So they can go back to that. So that's good, yeah. So offering opportunities to go back keeps their interest that way, and they can, because you don't always get it the first time. That's why I'm going to post this online so you guys have access to it. Good job, guys. And I was reading some similar things online. Motivated with goals set and are engaged because positive and reinforcement. You know, they're reinforced to do the work. So motivation is huge. All right, good job, guys. So we'll look at the second one. Representation, multiple means of representation. This is like testing how you know they learn the material. So let's look at this video.
Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is a design framework that instructors can use to reduce barriers students face in the classroom and increase access to opportunities to succeed. We can implement UDL in our classrooms through 3 guidelines: engagement, representation, and action and expression. In this video, we will develop ways to integrate multiple means of representation, which explains the what networks in our heads, the recognition pieces of our brain that understand and process content. This particular UDL approach focuses on giving learners or guiding learners to content in a variety of information formats. By providing key content in different ways, you can help students to build important disciplinary knowledge and ways of thinking about course content. While this principle can be implemented in no-tech, low-tech, or high-tech ways, UDL adopters often use free and low-cost technology tools due to their powerful learning possibilities. First, let's talk about some concrete strategies that can help students across classrooms without watering down learning outcomes. Now, of course, not every one of these strategies will work in every course or subject area. It's important for you to find the ones that you're comfortable with and that align with your goals for learners. One important way you can provide multiple means of representation is to help learners to develop important vocabulary. This might mean offering a glossary of key terms or providing a link to a resource students can use to find information about important concepts and figures related to your course content. You can also give learners resources that they can control.
both in playback speed and sound? Could you record part or all of your class lectures using lecture capture software so students could review them at their own pace after class? Or could you identify video resources online, like those available through OU Library's streaming video databases, that students could use to enhance their disciplinary knowledge? Another approach to providing multiple means of representation is to point out important relationships and structures to students. This might mean using a concept map to illustrate relationships between ideas in a course, or annotating a text to point out key features. You could also provide short videos that emphasize these connections or structural elements. And finally, consider how you can chunk information into smaller content to help students manage it more effectively. For example, can you dissect course content into segments and build topical or conceptual units that highlight connections between these more discrete ideas? Or could you use Moodle tools, such as the book or lesson activity, to break up content into more manageable packages for students? These are some ways to consider multiple means of representation that may help all learners in your classroom. Some of these may sound familiar, as many of them are simply good pedagogical strategies. If you're looking to target specific learner groups in your discipline, it's helpful to first identify who they are and what they need in terms of representation. For example, providing text and spoken equivalents of visual material can help non-proficient readers, international students, or introverts. Or offering content that has hyperlinked information or footnotes can support students with cognitive impairments, English language learners, and underachieving students. For more information on concrete strategies to integrate multiple means of representation into your teaching, visit oakland.edu/CETL or check out the strategies shared by CAST, or the National Center on UDL.
All right, so talk with your neighbor about what you learned from that video.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, we usually play that. Think she did too. Yeah, that's what we like, we're like rewatch it.
Okay, so great conversations. Let's share again. What did you guys think?
We talked about offering learner-controlled resources, like being able to like record your lectures and have the students play it back on things they may have not picked up on the first time.
It's great, guys. I love the recording and playing it back. They're on speed.
Having a variety of informational format, just give them more options to use like different things.
Just different ways. Yeah, that's great. I want to, later on, at the end, I'll talk to you guys about teaching note-taking by drawing pictures, because it's huge. It breaks down all the whole issue of writing. You know, when you draw a picture, you can put a concept in place, you know, so it works. Good. You guys.
To go off of the choices you said, of the offer learner controlled resources, especially like nowadays, I've seen like teachers would like take videos of them like doing the paperwork
work from like they would send a video to the class and they would go like step by step, you know, how to do each problem. And, like the kids would be able to like stop, you know, and like watch the video again, slow it down.
So it's a process that they can follow,
Yeah.
and then it meets their needs to do it. So that's great. I love process. That's good. That's why you like using visual schedules for kids and using schedules in sense. Rubrics are the same thing. It's a visual, it's a process. So it's good stuff. This group?
We talked about chunking the information into smaller pieces.
I love chunking. You can only keep about 7 to 8 pieces of information in your working memory at any one time. And how many digits is a phone number? It's like 9, 10. When you chunk it, the area code, the prefix, and the suffix, that's 3. It's great. Chunking's fabulous. It's a great strategy to use. Good job. Okay, and final, last two.
A lot of visual materials are really beneficial for a lot of different learners because you can break down the materials for them.
Great. So we're taking away a lot of good stuff, and I'm trying to show you how we're doing multiple ways to represent. We're trying it all today. So then we're going to look at the how of learning, the action expression. So let's look at that. You get tired of this girl's
Universal
voice.
Design for Learning, or UDL, is a design framework that instructors can use to reduce barriers students face in the classroom and increase access to opportunities to succeed. We can implement UDL in our classroom through 3 guidelines: engagement, representation, and action and expression. In this video, you will develop ways to integrate multiple means of action and expression, which give learners diverse ways to express how they understand course content and develop course skills as a result of course experiences. By providing a number of ways for students to demonstrate their knowledge, you can help them more fully attain course outcomes. While this principle can be implemented in no-tech, low-tech, or high-tech ways, UDL adopters often use free and low-cost technology tools due to their powerful learning possibilities. First, let's talk about some concrete strategies that can help students across classrooms without watering down learning outcomes. Now, of course, not every one of these strategies will work in every course or subject area. It's up to you to find the ones that you're comfortable with and that align with your goals for learners. Can you build opportunities for learners to communicate their knowledge and understanding in a variety of formats as appropriate and relevant for your course content? Of course, if you teach a writing-intensive course, writing is going to be a key component. But consider the kinds of writing you're asking students to do. Vary the length, purpose, and intended audience to help students see how writing exists across your discipline and its relevance across their personal and professional lives. Also, if on-the-spot presentations aren't key to your course outcomes, let students pre-record any talks or demonstrations so that they can refine their work. Then, in your class session, they can focus on responding to questions in deep and meaningful ways. Also, think about how you can share checklists or guides for note-taking with your students. This is a skill our learners often struggle in developing. Give them lecture outlines in advance of or after class so they can review content or build their note-taking abilities by giving them progressively less structured note guides. You can also give learners in your classroom examples of different ways to solve problems, both with real-life and academic examples. These kinds of instances can help them act on their own knowledge or see how your course is meaningful in their lives.
You can actively do this by building time at the beginning or end of your course sessions where you focus on how the subject area knowledge can be used to think about real-world problems. Or you can pose authentic situations to students and ask them to consider how they would respond. They might have to come up with their own ideas, or perhaps they can find examples to share with the whole class. And finally, consider different ways students could express their knowledge and ideas with you and with their peers. Consider class formats that allow students to meet with you individually, with a small group of students, or as a whole class. This can be facilitated through on-campus meetings or synchronous sessions online using WebEx and Moodle. These are some ways to consider multiple means of action and expression that may help all learners in your classroom. Some of these may sound familiar, as many of them are simply good pedagogical strategies. If you're looking to target specific learner groups in your discipline, it's helpful to first identify who they are and what they need in terms of action and expression. For example, prompting students to stop and think about a key concept or show and explain their understandings can help students with anxiety, international students, or introverted learners in demonstrating their knowledge. Or employing online discussion tools in addition to or in lieu of face-to-face discussions can enable students with auditory impairments, non-traditional students, and underachieving students, among others, to more effectively share their thoughts and ideas. For more information on concrete strategies to integrate multiple means of action and expression in your teaching, visit oakland.edu/CETL or check out strategies shared by CAST, or the National Center on UDL.
So there's a final video that we're going to not watch today, but you guys can go online and download the PowerPoint and watch it. It's the same CETL video. It talks about the variability and cultural diversity in using UDL. So that was another little 4 or 5 minute video, and it's right there. But there's also research on this and seeing if you use universal design, it helps with the learning differences of people from different languages and different cultures and different backgrounds. You know, I'm originally from California, and so I'm kind of a laid back kind of guy. I'm not super intense, and so my learning, how I learn, is much more relaxed and intensive. So like if you go to the East Coast, you get people that are really intense, you know. Not Yankees aren't always this good. It's different just because of our environments. So that's why we need to know cultural variability. So that's important. Okay, and putting it all together, there's some more videos that you can watch as we go through, and how we'll do that. On Thursday, you guys will be online. We'll engage in some kind of activities. We'll take some case studies and look at this UDL piece there. Any questions that you have for me before the day you're here? All right. You guys have a great day. I'll see you virtually on Thursday, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day. Bye, guys. We'll see you guys face to face on Thursday.